I'm leaving you, heading to Palm Springs with my new 25-year-old girlfriend, taking every last cent with me. That was the message that lit up my phone at 3 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. Minutes after I dragged myself off a 14-hour shift on the oil rig. My name is Miles Harrington. I'm 52 years old, and for nearly 3 decades, I've been carving out a life working platforms scattered across the globe. My palms were still slick with grease when I stared down at the glowing screen. It was from Krista, my wife of 18 years. Before I could even register the first text, another came through. A screenshot, our joint bank account. The balance should have shown $142,000 instead. It displayed $0. She tagged it with a kiss emoji, like it was some kind of playful inside joke. I didn't hurl the phone across the cramped quarters. I didn't smash the bunk rail or curse loud enough for the other 2 riggers sharing the space to hear. Instead, I simply typed back, "Sure, good luck." Then I powered it off and dragged myself into the shower, steam rising while my mind fell into silence. The next morning, the men noticed. I skipped breakfast and went straight to the day's safety briefings. Jackson, my right hand, a man who could read me better than most, kept sneaking glances while we checked equipment, but he never asked. Out here, with 16 men relying on me to keep this floating steel island stable, personal problems stayed locked inside. During the lunch break, I opened my laptop. Sure enough, Krista had wasted no time. Divorce papers already filed. The claim that I'd abandoned the marriage by working overseas too long. She'd hired a shark named Bradley, a lawyer with a reputation for bleeding heroining spouses dry. They wanted spousal support, pointing to my excessive income. And then, the final twist of the knife, she mentioned her emotional support partner, a 25-year-old kid who was now comfortably living in the house I bought in Odessa. Our house. I closed the laptop without a word and went back to work, shoulders squared like nothing had happened. But that night, when the noise of the rig dimmed and the desert air pressed heavy against the steel walls, I wrote one email, not to Krista, to my cousin Brendan, an accountant in Houston. "Time to activate Protocol Winter," I typed. No further explanation needed. 3 minutes later, his reply came. "Already on it. Don't engage until you're back in the States." I still had 2 weeks left on this rotation. 2 more weeks of back-breaking 12-hour shifts in 110-degree heat while the life I thought I had was quietly dismantled back home. Sure, I could have asked for emergency leave. The crew would have understood. But what good would it have done? Better to finish the job, collect the paycheck, and keep my composure. That night, as I turned in, the rig supervisor, Vincent, stopped by my bunk. "Everything steady?" he asked. He wasn't just talking about the operation. "Under control," I answered, and I meant it. More than Krista would ever know. I met Krista 19 years earlier at my buddy's fishing supply shop in Odessa. She worked the register, 31 years old at the time, throwing sharp one-liners at customers who thought buying a lure made them fishermen. I was 33, already a decade into oil work, between contracts and helping my friend restock inventory. 11 months later, we were married, quick by most standards, but it felt right. I'd already laid down the foundation of a good life on my house outright thanks to a lucky investment in a small oil producer that got bought out, and had a steady, lucrative path on the international rigs. She said she admired my discipline and direction. I admired her fire, her way of drawing people in. The rotation schedule was always the shadow hanging over us. 2 months offshore, 1 month home. But the money, the kind that made it worthwhile. Half a year's pay for most men in our town I could bring home in 6 months. We agreed. I'd work the rotations. She'd keep the home strong. Together we'd build a future. For a while, it worked. But by year 12, the cracks started to show. Little remarks about missed birthdays, pointed questions about the Saudi contract, comments about how her friends' husbands were always around for barbecue. At the time, I brushed them aside. Looking back, they were warning shots I ignored. By the time I hit 47, the questions stopped. The video calls grew shorter. The spark that used to light up her voice was gone. Last Christmas, I came home to find the house completely redecorated, new furniture, new paint, like I'd stepped into someone else's home. When I asked, she said, I needed a change. I didn't ask what kind. 2 months ago, I saw the transfers from our joint account into another I didn't recognize. House repairs, she told me. Foundation work. But before I left for this rotation, I drove by. Not a nail moved. No sign of repairs. Just a sleek black Audi parked in the driveway. A car I'd never seen before 4 weeks ago. She stopped answering my calls altogether. Just a few short texts. Busy with a new project. I almost booked a flight home then. Instead, I told myself to trust my wife of 18 years 3 days ago. Our neighbor Harold texted me a picture of a moving truck in front of the house. Thought you should know, was all he wrote. I didn't respond. I just waited. Sometimes patience reveals more truth than confrontation. The day after her message, after another grueling shift, the satellite phone rang. Brendan's voice on the other end. You sitting down? He asked. Tell me straight. She's been setting this up for at least 14 months, he said. Regular transfers into a separate account under her maiden name. Started small, $2,000 here, $3,000 there. Then bigger withdrawals these last 90 days. Totals $214,000, not just the $142,000. From the joint, the floor seemed to tilt under me. That was far beyond what I thought we'd saved. There's more, Brendan added, voice tightening. She changed the beneficiary on your life insurance 6 months ago and took out a $40,000 home equity line of credit your signature forged. I sat there, the low rumble of the rig's generators vibrating through the bunk. 18 years together, nearly 2 decades of building a life, and she'd been dismantling it piece by piece while smiling at me on video calls, telling me she missed me. I asked finally, Devon Forrester, 25 just like she said, extraner, no steady job for years, history of relationships with older women, all ended within 18 months. I didn't need Brendan to spell it out. And Miles, his voice dropped lower. 2 one-way tickets to Palm Springs, booked for next Tuesday, 3 days from now, not just leaving, disappearing with everything. I hung up, let the darkness settle over me. Memories clicked into place like a puzzle suddenly showing the real image. The late-night calls, her sudden fitness obsession, the complaints about money despite healthy savings. The betrayal wasn't what crushed me most. It was the strategy, the patience, the quiet dismantling of our life while she pretended we were still a team. Something hardened inside me. I opened my locker, pulled out my laptop and logged into the account no one but Brendan and I knew about. Winter Holdings, a shell company we'd set up years back after watching a colleague lose everything in a divorce. The screen loaded. Balance, $1.6 million. I'd been preparing for this storm longer than she could imagine. 70% of my income there for 8 years. Legal declared on taxes, but our marital assets through the corporate structure Brendan had us. I sent a single email to Milo Hare in Houston. Proceed with Operation Cold Return. Then I closed my laptop and went to the mess hall for coffee. For the first time in days, if thought hungry, I landed in Houston 38 hours after my rotation ended. Brendan met me at the airport, handed me a burner phone and a folder of documents. She's been calling your regular number nonstop since yesterday, he said as we walked to his car. The bank froze the account she transferred the money to. Standard procedure for large unusual. They're requesting you come in person to verify. She doesn't know him back. No one does except me and Thomas. Thomas was my lawyer, but that's not the most interesting development. I pulled out his tablet and showed me a series of text messages. They were between Krista and someone saved as DI skimmed through them. Plans for their new life. Jokes about me working overseas while they spent my money. Details about the house they'd already put a deposit on in Palm Springs. Butone exchange from 2 days ago caught my. Krista Bank froze the money. Need Miles to verify in person. What do? He's still on the rig for 10 more days. Tell him there's an emergency with your mum. Get him to authorize you to handle it. You're still his wife, Krista. He's not answering my calls. Try harder. We need that money before the house closing next week, or we need to look at Plan B, Krista. I'm not comfortable with Plan B. It's just insurance money. He works at Danger Rooster for a reason. People have exceedance all the time. I handed the tablet back to Brendan. My hands were steady. But these are admissible? I asked. They're from the cloud backup of her. She used your Apple account credentials to set up her new phone last year. Never changed the password. Everything syncs to your cloud storage. We drove straight to He'd already prepared divorce papers, a criminal complaint for theftery on the home equity loan, and an emergency motion to freeze all assets. There's a complication, Thomas said once we're seated. She's filed a domestic violence claim against you yesterday. Says she left because of ongoing emotional abuse and financial control. Claimed she was in fear for her safety. That's absurd, I said. I've been 6,000 miles away for the past 7 weeks. Doskimata. It's a tactic to gain sympathy with the judge and justify taking her lawyer's pushing for an emergency hearing tomorrow to get a restraining order against you and exclusive use of the house. So she wants to ban me from my own property while her boyfriend lives there. Thomas nodded. And there's more. The home equity loan, she already spent it. Transferred it Tone, LLC, registered to Devon Forrester 3 days after receiving it. I took a deep breath. Options: we counterfeit, fraud, forgery, alienation of affection, criminal conspiracy. Based in those text messages, we request an emergency freeze on all her accounts and the LLC. And he slid a document across desk. We file this. I looked down at the paper. Motion to dismiss domestic violence claim with evidence of perjury. What evidence? Thomas smiled thinly. Your location data from your company security badge shows you've been on that oil platform for 7 continuous weeks. Your passport entry and exit stamps confirm it. And I subpoenaed your phone records showing all calls between Yatwo for the past year. Nothing's Augusting arguments or threats. Isn't where indicated. One more thing, Thomas said. We need you to aposoprist when she's served. She can't know you're back yet. For now you're still officially at sea. I nodded. I can do that. As I left Thomas's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Krista Tummy, regular number. Please call me. It's an emergency. I need you. The trap was set, but not by. I stayed at Brendan's place that night, sleeping better than I had in weeks. The next morning I logged into the security camera feed for our house in Odessa, a system I'd installed 3 years ago and maintained remotely. Krista had either forgotten about it, or assumed I couldn't access it. The footage showed a young man lounging by the pool, our pool, drinking from my collection of whiskey and wearing what looked like my old colleague's. He was on my phone with Simone laughing, feet up on the outdoor furniture I'd built by hand. While I watched, Krista came into frame. She looked anxious, pacing as she talked. I couldn't hear the audio, but her body language was clear. Things weren't going gockarding. Brendan came in with coffee. "You should see this," he said, opening his. He'd spent the night diving deeper into Devon Forrest's background. What he found changed everything. He's done this before, 3 times. Brendan turned the screen toward me. Each time same pattern: meets a woman, usually married, always financially stable. Relationship develops. Woman leaves husband, taking whatever money she can. They move away together. Within 18 months, he disappears with whatever. The screen showed news articles, court records, social media posts. 3 women across 5 years, all left financially ruined. One still paying off credit card debt Devon had accumulated in her name. There's more, Brendan said quietly. He was briefly a person of interest in the death of his second girlfriend's ex. Suspicious car accident 6 weeks after the man went off a cliff on a road had driven for 20 years. No charges were ever filed, but the implication hung in the air between us. Krista again on my regular. I let it go to voicemail. "You should hear this," Brendan said, playing the message on speaker. "Miles, please. I need you to call Thaban." Her voice cracked with what sounded like tears. "There's been a misunderstanding with our account. I was just moving money to a safer investment like we talked about, but the bank froze even. I can't access any funds. Please call them and tell them it's so. I'm really scared. We talked about no such thing. The performance was. I'd have believed her 2 weeks ago. She's desperate," Thomas said when we met him for lunch. "The house closing in Palm Springs is in 5 days. They need that money." "What's our next move?" I asked. "The emergency hearing is this afternoon. Judge Winters is. She has 0 tolerance for false domestic violence claims. We have a documented alibi ready, and the bank funds. We've filed to have them returned to you exclusively, but there's something else you should know." Thomas laid a folder across the table. "Your neighbor Harold sent these to my offices this morning. Inside were photos of furniture being loaded into a my furniture, family heirlooms, things that had been in my family for They're clearing out the house," Thomas confirmed, "planning to disappear whether they get the bank money or not." I closed the folder and handed it back. "Change of plans." Bothman looked at me. "I want to go home. That's not advisable before Thomas. Not to confront them. To watch from Harold's place. I want to see this with my own eyes." Brendan and Thomas exchanged looks and Ewan to be there when they're served. Not hiding behind legal papers. "I want Krista to see my face when her world Thomas nodded slowly. "I'll arrange it." As we left the restaurant, a text came through on my burner phone. It was from Harold. "They're packing your grandfather's desk now. The one you thought you'd want to know. Some thefts go beyond money. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. This had just become personal in an entire line way." The 6-hour drive to Odessa gave him time to think. Thomas arranged 4th Sheriff to serve papers at 9 a.m. the next morning. Brendan set up surveillance from Harold's house at Cross Street where I'd stay overnight. Everything was in place. Harold greeted him with a silent handshake when he arrived just after midnight. He was a retired petroleum engineer who'd worked rigs himself for 30 years. No explanations needed. She has no idea we're watching. I asked once we were inside. None. They've been busy packing all day, loading the good stuff, leaving the rest. He pointed to his front window, which had a clear view of my driveway. 2 moving trucks came and went. Big one's coming tomorrow morning for the last load. I nodded. Processing. Anyone else been by? Some woman with a clipboard yesterday looked like a real estate agent. That wasn't they're selling the house. Listing it looks like saw her taking pictures. I called Thomas, who promised to check property records first thing in the morning. At 3 a.m. unable to slip. I sat at Harold's kitchen table viewing the documentation Brendan had. Bank records showing Krista systemic draining of our accounts. Phone records revealing hours of Calster. Devon going back over a year. Credit card statements showing hotel charges in your own town on days she claimed to be visiting her sister. There was a cold clarity in seeing the evidence laid out. Not just a momentary betrayal, but a calculated extraction, a deliberate dismantle of everything we'd built piece by piece. By sunrise, Thomas had texted confirmation. Krista had listed our house with a real estate agency 2 days earlier. Asking price was 30% below market value, priced for a quick sale. She'd forged my signature on the list. At 8:30 a.m., I watched from Harold's kitchen window as Krista and Devon loaded the last items into Devon's black Audi. Small valuables, my grandmother's silver picture frames, the antique watch my father had given me before he died. At 8:45 a.m., a large moving truck pulled up. 3 men got out and approached the house right on schedule. At 8:55 a.m., an unmarked car parked directly behind moving truck, blocking it in. 2 sheriff's deputies and a woman in a business suit emerged. Thomas had sent a court officer along with them. It's time, I said to Harold. I walked across street as the deputies approached my front door. Krista answered, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion as the officers identified well as Mrs. Harrington. We have paperwork to serve you and the gentleman in the premises. I stayed just out of sight, watching from the edge of the driveway as the color drained from her. She called for Devon, who appeared behind her, his arms sliding possessively around her waist. That's when I stepped into view. The look on Krista's face was one I'll never forget. Shock giving way to fear, then calculation. Devon just looked confused. Miles, she whispered, you're supposed to be on the rig. Surprise, I said quietly, nodding to the deputies to proceed. They handed over the stack after emergency restraining order against them, freezing of all assets, criminal complaint for forgery, nullification of the home listing, and notice of divorce proceedings, sitting fraud and criminal You can't do this, Devon spoke up, puffing out his chest. She's afraid of you. We have a domestic violence claim dismissed this morning by Judge Winters. I interrupted, hard to abuse someone from 6,000 miles away. The judge was particularly interested in the text messages discussing your plan involving my insurance policy. His face went slack. Krista stepped forward, tears already forming. Miles, this is all a misunderstanding. I was just saving our documents. I finished for her, gesturing to the moving truck. Protecting our assets by emptying our house. Planning our future by selling go home without telling me. She had known swear for that. You have 30 minutes to move personal items only, the court officer stated. Clothing and toiletries. Everything else stays pending court investigation. As they went inside under supervision, I turned to walk away. Where are you going? Krista called after me. I didn't look back. Home. The hearing took place 3 weeks later. I sat at one table with Thomas, Krista, and a lawyer at another. Devon was conspicuously absent. He disappeared 2 days after being served, taking Krista's remaining cash and jewelry with him. A familiar pattern, just as Brendan had discovered. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically. Bank accords, forged documents, text messages, location data. When she reached the messages discussing plan, banned insurance money, she stopped reading and looked directly at Krista. Mrs. Harrington, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud or worse? Krista's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. It wasn't like that, Your Honor, Krista stammered. Devon was just, I never would have saved it for criminal proceedings. The judge, this court's jurisdiction is the division of assets and dissolution of marriage. She continued reading through the documents, occasionally shaking her head. When she finished, she set the papers down and removed her glasses. In my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a clear case of premeditated financial deception in a marriage. She looked at Krista. You systematically drained joint accounts while forging documents and planning to flee the state with Mary. Turning to me, her expressions often slightly, Mr. Harington, while your creation of separate accounts through a holding company might seem questionable to some, the court finds that you consistently household expenses, filed proper taxes, and made no attempt to hide assets from the government only to protect them from potential future claims. Her ruling was swift and final. All assets transferred by Krista Woodborough returned to me. The house remains my property. Krista's claims for spousal support were denied, and satisfyingly she referred the forgery and conspiracy evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal. As we left the courtroom, Krista tried to approach me. I just kept walking. Some victories need no words. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my cabin in the mountains outside Missoula, Montana. The property had been part of Winterlight Holdings, 40 acres of pine forest and meadow I'd bought 5 years earlier as a retirement plan. Krista never knew the forgery charges against her had been reduced in a plea deal. No jail time, but 5 years probation and restitution payments she'd likely never. Last I heard, she was living with her sister in Tulsa. Devon had moved on to a divorcee doctor in Arizona, his pattern continuing unbroken. I'd taken early retirement from the oil company. 27 years was enough. Between my investments, savings, and the small natural gas royalties from Apripity in Arkansas, I had more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Harold called occasionally with updates from Odessa. I'd sold the house with too many memories, none of them good anymore. He'd helped clear out the list of my things, shipping the family heirlooms to Montana and donating. The afternoon mail brought an envelope from Brendan, final paperwork showing the dissolution of Winterlight. Its purpose was complete, assets transferred, taxes paid, a chapter closed. As the sun set behind mountains, I poured a glass of bourbon and sat on the porch swing I'd built that summer. For the first time in years, no one was expecting anything from me. No crew waiting for instructions. No wife pretending to miss. Just quiet and the sound of wind in the pines. My phone rang. A new project manager at a Canadian oil company offering a consulting position. Good money, minimal travel, just sharing expertise I'd accumulated over the. I'll think about it, I told him. And I would, but not tonight. Tonight was just for me. For the peace he'd earned. For the life I was finally living on my own terms.